So you're saying I should bribe my kid. You've probably heard that before, maybe with a raised eyebrow, maybe with a laugh, a bit of a chuckle. But that moment matters more than we think. Because if a parent walks away thinking reinforcement means bribery, we lose their trust. And the whole strategy loses its power. We've been trained to define reinforcement by the book, measured by behavior change, broken into types, and tied to data. But none of that helps when you're sitting across from a parent who's just trying to get out the door in the morning without a meltdown. And if we try to explain it with behavior charts or conditioning theory, we actually just lose them. Most parents aren't pushing back intentionally. They're just tired and stretched way too thin. And when something sounds too clinical or complicated, it feels like one more thing that they could mess up. So when we say reinforcement, they think bribery. And yeah, I kind of get it. They check out. I would too. That's when I shift the language. I'll say something like, it's not a bribe, it's a plan. Or we're not rewarding bad behavior, we're rewarding effort. That kind of language helps parents feel like we're in this together, not trying to trick anyone. So stick with me because once you reframe reinforcement this way, your whole parent training session feels less like explaining and more like you're actually connecting. But here's how I teach parents about positive reinforcement without making it sound like a bribe and without slipping into that ABA jargon we love so much. I start with a simple question. Why do you go to work every day? Most parents say something like, so I have money, or because I need a paycheck. And this is exactly right and what I want them to be thinking about. Even if you love parts of your job, you probably wouldn't show up if you didn't get a paycheck. And your child is the same way. If we're asking them to do something hard or something they wouldn't choose to do on their own, they need a reason to do it. They need a payoff, their own paycheck. Of course, their currency isn't money, at least not most of the time. It might be something like goldfish crackers, or it could be Mario Kart. Maybe it's jumping on the trampoline or even picking the music in the car on the way to school. So let's stretch that metaphor just a little bit. Imagine your boss says, I'm not going to give you a paycheck this week. I'm going to give you apples instead. Apples are healthy. Sure. But if apples aren't your currency, they don't feel like a reward. That's how a child feels when we offer praise or a sticker for something that took real effort for them, but it didn't match what actually motivates them. I teach parents to find what's really motivating for their child. And I say things like, when you clean up your toys, you can get your tablet. That's a simple, clear way to communicate a reinforcement contingency without games or threats. And instead of saying just good job, I'll suggest parents try something more like, you worked really hard on that, or you kept going even when it was tricky. This adds a new level of meaning and can build intrinsic motivation as children discover satisfaction in working hard. When parents struggle with limiting access to their child's highest level reinforcers, I talk to them about what I call the money tree problem. So I ask parents, if you had a money tree in your backyard that gave you $1 million a day, would you still go to work? Well, of course they wouldn't. If they truly loved their job, there might be some parts of it that they would do, but they probably would cut back their hours. They would pick and choose the tasks that they're willing to do. I often tell parents how much I love helping them, working with their kids and the staff. But if I had a money tree in my backyard, I wouldn't be writing those treatment plans. Now I ask them to think about their child. If the child gets their favorite things, whether it's TV, snacks, their tablet, no matter what they're doing, then they've got their own money tree. There's no reason to do the hard thing that you're asking them to do. So reinforcement only works when there's a contrast. when the effort leads to access. So I'll coach parents to use phrases like, you can work for iPad time if you want it. Just that one shift helps motivation make sense for parents. And it often opens the door for the child asking to do chores or other tasks. And here's the thing, most BCBAs get this, but where we struggle is helping parents actually apply it in real life. Once I teach it this way, things start to click. Parents stop thinking reinforcement is giving in or bribery and start seeing it as giving their child a reason to try. But this conversation can still go sideways fast, even with good intentions. So here are 3 common mistakes I see BCBAs make in ABA parent training. The first mistake is using the word reinforcement too early. We say it all the time. It's second nature to us. But for parents, it can sound cold, clinical, or just plain confusing, especially if they already associate it with things like sticker charts, behaviorism, or bribery. So instead, I try to lead with meaning. I'll say something like, let's help them feel like the effort is worth it, or we're giving them a reason to try. That lands better. It makes it sound like parenting and not a psychology lecture. The second mistake BCBAs make a lot is treating reinforcement like it's some brand new concept that parents have never heard before, instead of something most parents are already doing every single day. They offer iPad time for calm transitions. They give dessert after a clean plate. They say one more bite and then you're done. They're reinforcing behavior all of the time. They just don't know that's what they're doing. If we don't connect reinforcement to what they're already doing, we're missing out on a huge opportunity to help them. So I'll ask, what's something you already do to help Johnny through something that's hard for him? And when they answer, I'll say, great, you're already reinforcing. Let's just be a little bit more intentional with it. It turns the whole conversation into a collaboration. And here's the last mistake that many BCBAs make when teaching reinforcement during parent training. They use examples that sound great in a textbook, but don't actually match real life. They might say things like, make sure to reinforce on-task behavior, or deliver a token after task completion. And sure, that works in a classroom or in a clinic. But when you're talking to a parent who's just trying to get their kid in shoes while the toddler's throwing goldfish on the floor, those examples don't really help. So I try to ground it in something that they really experience. I'll say something like, okay, let's say you're trying to get your child out the door and they're locked into Minecraft mode. How do we make that moment easier using reinforcement? Because when the example feels real, the strategy finally feels possible. At this point, most parents say something like, okay, but how do I actually do this in real life? And that's where the rest of the structure really matters. That's why we created the Achieve Parent Training System, because it's not enough for us to understand reinforcement. We have to explain it in a way parents can use on a Tuesday morning when the cereal spills, the baby's crying, and the iPad has already been on for an hour. Achieve gives you a consistent structure to teach ABA strategies without having to reinvent your coaching script every time. You get real world examples, coaching scripts, and metaphors like paycheck versus the money tree that actually land with families. We even include videos that explain these concepts for you between sessions so you can focus on strengthening these skills rather than starting from scratch. Because in those stressful moments, the simpler the language, the more likely it gets used. So here are my 5 go-to reinforcement phrases for parents. Let's make the hard thing worth it. Would you go to work if you didn't earn a paycheck? Let's give them a reason to try. Would you show up if you had a money tree in your backyard? And it's not a bribe, it's a plan. If this helped you rethink how you talk about reinforcement with parents, you'll want to check out my next video. It's all about how to teach prompting in a way that builds independence, not dependence. And tell me in the comment, What's one metaphor or phrase you've used that finally made it click for parents? Let's build a better toolbox together.